Marvellous Gift. The prince's adventures began one afternoon in early autumn. It was the habit of his father, Shah Sabur of Persia, to open the gates of his palace twice a year for the spring and autumn festivals. During these celebrations, the streets were sprinkled with rose petals, sweets were given to the children, and everyone dressed in their finest clothes. Shah Sabur opened up his kitchens and his treasury, distributing food and money, dispensing justice, and accepting greetings and gifts in return. On this particular occasion, an Indian magician, skilled in making curios and rare inventions, was among the crowds. The magician presented the Shah with an extraordinary gift. It was a full-sized wooden horse, carved in such a manner that it looked almost alive. Its coat shone black, ebony, and it wore a finely crafted saddle and bridle, inlaid with golden studs and glittering jewels. Everyone marvelled at its beauty. "Tell me," asked Shah Sabur, "what is the purpose of this object?" "Your Majesty," the magician replied, bowing low, "when you mount this horse, it will carry you up into the air and take you wherever you want to go. Moreover, in a single day, it will travel farther than you and I could travel in a year." The Shah was no fool, so he invited the magician to give a demonstration. And it was true. The horse could fly right around the palace. No one had ever seen anything like it. "What would you like in return for your gift?" asked Sabur. "You may have whatever you wish for." Now, the magician had heard of the beauty and grace of the Shah's youngest daughter. So he told Sabur, "If you are truly pleased with my gift, Your Majesty, my wish is to ask for your youngest daughter's hand in marriage." But the princess, who had been following discussions from the women's quarters, was horrified because the magician was old and ugly, with a nose like an aubergine and lips as pendulous as those of a camel. She ran straight to her room and threw herself on her bed, sobbing loudly. Her brother, who had just returned from a hunting expedition, heard her cries and rushed to her room. She told him everything. The prince, whose name was Qamar al-Akmar, or Moon of Moons, went straight to his father and confronted him. The Shah shrugged. "Don't worry about your sister," he said. "Her suitor is quite worthy of her, no matter what he may look like." Then he showed his son the remarkable ebony horse and introduced him to the magician. The prince was enchanted. He mounted the horse straight away. "How does it work?" he asked as he swung into the saddle. But the magician, who was worried by this turn of events, simply gave him an enigmatic smile and a deep bow. He was right to be concerned, for as soon as Qamar al-Akmar picked up the reins of the horse, it started to fly. Up, up, up it rose above the roofs of the city, high into the sky, and over the mountains, hills, and valleys. Within a matter of minutes, the prince had disappeared from sight. "Bring him back," demanded the Shah. But the magician shook his head. "Alas, Your Majesty, I cannot. Your son is too impulsive. He has let the ebony horse fly too high and too fast. There is nothing I can do." Then the Shah flew into a rage. He called his guards and had the magician taken to the dungeons. At first, Qamar al-Akmar was very excited by the novelty of flying the horse. Then, realizing he knew neither how to bring it down, nor turn it around, nor stop it, he began to panic. But being a courageous and resourceful young man, he did not completely lose his nerve. Instead, he started twiddling the horse's ears. He soon discovered that by doing this, he could control the horse, making it fly up and down and in different directions. Down he flew, and as he drew closer to the earth, he saw a magnificent palace surrounded by battlements and protected by many guards. "Hurrah," he thought. "This looks like a good place to stop." But wanting to evade the guards, he decided to land on top of the palace rather than risking the ground. So he steered the horse onto the roof. Then he went down one of the palace staircases, looking for food and drink, as he had not eaten since the morning. Passing through a magnificent courtyard, he saw a light and went towards it. There he found a guard sleeping in front of a door, his hand on his sword, his provision bag hanging beside him. The prince quietly took the bag off its hook and ate its contents. Then he took the guard's sword and opened the door quietly. The guard continued to snore away. In the room, Kamar el-Akmar was astonished to find a beautiful princess. She lay asleep in an ivory bed, inlaid with jewels and draped with silk curtains embroidered with thousands of tiny pearls. He was so amazed at her loveliness that he spent a long time just gazing at her. Then he could not resist any more. He drew back one of the curtains, leaned over, and gave her a kiss on the cheek. Straight away the princess woke up, and she was about to scream when she realised that the person standing by her bed was the most handsome young man she had ever seen. So she quickly recovered her wits, asked him who he was, and sat up and listened to his story. When Kamar el-Akmar had finished, the princess, whose name was Shams el-Nahar, or Day Sun, introduced herself as the daughter of the king of Sana'a in Yemen. Kamar el-Akmar had flown a long way south in just one day. Hearing voices in the bedchamber, the princess's handmaids all woke up and raised the alarm. Kamar el-Akmar was seized by the palace guards and brought before the king. On learning that the intruder was a prince, the king was courteous to his unexpected guest and offered him a room for the night. But he was also so upset by the poor security in the palace that the next morning he challenged Kamar el-Akmar to prove he was indeed a king's son by fighting his whole army. Without a moment's hesitation, Kamar el-Akmar accepted, so the king ordered for his commander-in-chief to prepare for battle. The army arrived on horseback, in full armour. Seeing so many soldiers lined up outside the palace, Kamar el-Akmar told the king, "It seems unfair that I should fight your army on foot, while your men are mounted on horses. I ask permission to use my horse, your majesty." The king agreed to this, and Kamar el-Akmar raced up the stairs to the roof, sprang into the saddle of the ebony horse, and started twiddling its ear. His mount swayed backwards and forwards and made the strangest movements. Then it began to rise, gliding slowly over the palace. The soldiers were so stunned by the sight of the flying horse that they forgot to draw their weapons. By the time they had realised what was happening, the prince was high in the sky, waving down at them. "Catch him! Catch the rogue!" cried the king. But the advisers restrained him. "Let him go. Let him go," they said. "He must surely be a magician or a genie, so good riddance to him." As for Shams el-Nahar, she took to her chambers, refusing food and drink, for she had fallen deeply in love. Kamar el-Akmar flew like the wind until he reached his father's palace. Alighting on the roof, he saw that the stairs were strewn with ashes. "Oh, someone important must have died," he thought. When he entered the throne room, he found his entire family dressed in black and weeping for him, for they thought him gone forever. They rushed over to him, their tears of grief turning to tears of joy. Hugging and kissing him, they sat him down to a good meal, demanding to hear all about his adventures. The prince then told them of his encounter with the beautiful Shams el-Nahar, daughter of the king of Sana'a, and of how he had narrowly escaped being killed by her father's army. While they sat there, eating, drinking and rejoicing, Shah Sabur asked one of the court singers to entertain them. She sang a poem of love and remembrance, her words moving Kamar el-Akmar so much that he suddenly longed for the princess. So the moment the meal was finished, he excused himself. He climbed to the palace roof, mounted the ebony horse, and flew all the way back to Yemen. There he found Shams el-Nahar confined to her bed, pale and weak. She had not eaten a morsel since he had left. Kamar el-Akmar knelt at the princess' side and promised that he would come and visit her every week. But this was not enough for her. "Take me with you," she pleaded. "I cannot live without you any more." Then Shams el-Nahar packed a casket, put on her loveliest silk dress, wrapped her head and shoulders with a delicately embroidered shawl, and quietly slipped away with Kamar el-Akmar to the palace roof. The two of them mounted the ebony horse and flew back across the starry sky to the kingdom of Persia.